Hello, this is Yaakov Kronenberg from Jerusalem, and tonight we're going to be doing another class in our series of classes on Libra ascendant and Venus and the different signs. Tonight we'll be doing Venus in Virgo. Venus in Virgo is a very interesting combination, especially with the Libra ascendant, because it's going to fall in the 12th house, the house of self-undoing, the house of the soul, the house of imprisonment, illnesses, and so sometimes, and Venus is in detriment here. In fall. So it's quite weak. You don't like to have a weak ascendant, right? So when you have a Libra with Venus in Virgo, sometimes it can be a weak ascendant. We're going to do a chart tonight of somebody who was not so weak, actually. You always have to remember everything is based on combinations. You know, like there's going to be 1 out of every 144 people is going to have a Libra with Venus in Virgo. And I've seen a lot of Venus in Virgos in my life with Libra ascendants, and some of them are very difficult, and yet some of them are quite good. So it's not only, you have to look at all sorts of things taken together. You have to look at the dispositor of Venus. You have to look at the aspects Venus receives. You have to look at the total strength of the chart. All sorts of things until you can come to make a determination how good or how weak it is, how bad, how difficult the chart will be. For example, tonight I'm going to do a chart of a man who is very, very famous, incredibly successful man, by the name of Alfred Nobel. He started the Nobel Prizes with all the money he made in his lifetime. Tremendous inventor and stuff. We'll come back to him in a minute. And that's an example of somebody who, even with a difficult chart, a difficult ruling planet, he was unusually successful man. But on the other hand, I'm going to show you other charts that are not so successful. In other words, Venus is not so good in Mercury. Why? Because Mercury is a thinker, and Venus is the planet of love, right? If you start to think about who you love, you're not going to be in love anymore. Love is a feeling, right? It's a feeling, it's an emotion, and when you start to try to concretize it and think about it and analyze it like the Virgo does, then there's nothing left. It disappears. So it can be a difficult combination. But again, remember, Venus is a benefic, and Virgo is in the sign of Mercury, not a bad planet at all. So again, it doesn't have to be bad. It can be quite weak. Right? So if you get like this Venus with Virgo in the 12th house and other weak indications, so then it can be very difficult. I've seen plenty of women actually who ended up, like in prostitution and things like that, right, where they become imprisoned in a certain sense, because you have the ruling planet in the 12th, which is like imprisonment, and they become imprisonment because of their looks, right? The Venus is very attractive in Virgo. Actually, it's one of the most attractive places for Venus to be. So there could end up being this, imprisonment for that. I've seen lots of women like that. They sell themselves out to men and things like all sorts of things like that. And I've seen men too. We did the chart here. We spent time on the chart of a man who ran for the president of the United States by the name of John McCain. He was born with Libra rising and Venus in Virgo. He ended up, when he was in his youth, he was known as being a wild man. He ran around with women of disrepute, and he was like involved in a lot in that, and fixing up with his friends and all sorts of things like that. And then also he ended up in prison for 10 years in a prison camp. Right? That can be like, because he didn't have such a good Venus, the Venus in Virgo. Right? So there's another example of that, right? And so I have a lot of examples like that. But tonight let's do someone who has even though he had can be somewhat difficult, We'll show you someone who, like, because other areas of his chart was strong, it overcompensated for the Venus. Alright, you'll see right away if we look at Mr. Alfred Nobel. If you look at his Venus, even John McCain, he had a very rough 10 years, but other than that, he was a tremendously successful man. He's a senator of the United States, a very hard position to get to. And he's married to somebody who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and and he went to the United States Naval Academy, and he had a good life, the man, but except for the years that he was in prison. But so don't take it as necessarily that bad. There needs to be other indications. Right? And so now Mr. Alfred Nobel, so he's also born with the Venus in Virgo. It's working for his 12th house. And but if you look at the chart right away, you see that the Mercury, the dispositor, is in the 1st house in Scorpio. And so it sort of gives itself over to that Mercury, so it comes out of prison to a certain sense. I mean, I think, he was a man, he was very troubled in his soul by that he invented dynamite and things like that caused tremendous amount of destruction. And in the end of his life, during his lifetime, he became extremely wealthy from his inventions. And more than that, he took the money from his inventions, and his brothers were also tremendously successful in the oil business. And he invested with them and made a huge sums of money. And in the end, he started a foundation for all different prizes for people's accomplishments, called the Nobel Prize. And so if you look at his chart, the Venus is in Virgo, but it's disposited by the Mercury, and he's got a very, very strong 1st house. That's the first thing you notice. He's got the sun there, and the sun exalted right on. Sun is in fall, but it's right on the ascendant, which means he overcompensates. It becomes a strong sun, and he's got Mars there in honor in the 1st house. And Mercury, so he's a very brilliant man, right? When you have Mercury conjunct Mars, it can make you very, very brilliant. Venta, very original, right? He had Uranus very strong in the 4th house, trying to the ascendant, trying to the sun. And so all these things, as he had like 5, 6 planets on angles, right? He had the sun, Mars, and Mercury in the 1st house, Jupiter in the 7th, and the moon and Uranus in the 4th. So he had over six planets on the angles, which overcompensated for that Venus, and the Venus gave itself up to Mercury, which is in the 1st house. So it makes it a chart that in the end became very strong. He was a very successful man. In his marital affairs, he told me he had problems maritally wise, though he never got married. He had a few, I think that I saw he had like 3 relationships, but it looks like he never really had children. So there was some kind of suffering in that area of his life, but maybe with the symbolized by the Venus in the 12th, it could be. But it's surprising because he had you would think that this would be a man who, well, he had Jupiter in the 7th in the house of marriage, which is nice, but it was exactly opposite Mars, which could have sort of held back maybe a marriage. But I'm surprised he never got married. But anyway, I think we covered a lot of ground on this area of Venus in Virgo, and I thank everybody for listening.